Hi, everybody. How are you tonight? Good to see you.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us. I always feel like a kid with my,
I know.
my feet swinging. So my name's Ilana Glazer, and this is Alison, Leiby, our subject and star for this evening. So I met Alison. We were trying to do the math the other day,
Yeah.
but time is just, after these past couple of years, time is
No,
different
doesn't
than
count.
it was before. Yeah. But
I'm
we
still
met
31.
So we met about 6 or 7 years ago, and I saw Alison on stage, and her joke structure, her rhythm, her pace, how the content and the jokes were so radically female, and the way that you took up space, not making some big thing out of it, just being who you are on stage, radically female, unapologetic, seemingly unafraid. You know, we'll talk more about that. But I was just taken aback, and I was all, "Who's she? Who is she? Tell me now." And I somewhat approached you to be friends.
Yes.
And
Over a Twitter DM. You were like, hey, what's your number?
Oh,
And I was
very
like, ooh,
sexy.
okay.
Very sexy. I remember taking you to a bar to ask if we could be friends. But the DM is sexy. And yeah, and now we're one of each other's best friends and
Yes.
closest collaborators. And just one other thing I wanted to say before we get started is you have such a diverse friend group, but what strikes me about each of your groups is that there's just creativity abound. You really bring a prolificness to your personal life that I see in your work. And I'm so excited to be exploring that with all of you this evening. So give it up for Alison Leiby.
Thank you. Is this on? This is on. This is on, yes? You guys can hear me?
It is, yeah.
Okay. I can't, but
Yeah.
that's just probably me going deaf or something awful.
No, yeah, it's all good. Okay, so Alison, I want to talk about your journey of entering stand-up, because you didn't start in stand-up. It was more stand-up adjacent. So tell us what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I left college like desperate to become an English professor. That's like all I wanted to do.
Damn.
Just like I wanted to like read, write, and talk all the time. And now I do that, but for like a real amount of money, which academia couldn't promise. But I got rejected from every grad school I applied to. for my
No.
PhD. Every single. I mean, I
Who?
only applied.
Let's drag
I-
them. Who?
Yale.
Fuck yeah.
Boo. Harvard.
You don't want to go to
Princeton.
Harvard.
Yeah, it's like whatever.
Princeton's cool.
I went
Jersey,
to Cornell. It
there's-
was fine.
Okay, Cornell, yeah. Well, you know, that's lack of academic status is what makes a great comedian, I hear.
Yes. Yes. I think that's
It
true.
sets
I think
you
you're-
up. Okay,
You're
good.
not funny if you have a PhD.
That's right.
In English literature, which is probably true.
So
I
wow. Oh my gosh.
I didn't know what I wanted to do. I did all of these jobs kind of like creative adjacent. I worked in publishing. I worked at museums. And then I finally took a storytelling class from Kevin Alison from the State. Huge State fan. But I was like listening to The Moth a lot, and I was just like in that, and I was like, I had a near-death experience when I was 19. I almost died during a surgery, and I had processed it therapeutically, but not creatively yet. And I was just like trying to write about it, trying to figure out what to do. And I took the storytelling class to kind of like get that to be like, maybe it's this. And I did it, and I was like, oh, I'm just writing jokes now. This is just stand-up. But it kind of started with that learning about tension and structure and like resolution in a real way in a 7 to 10 minute monologue. And that was kind of the first performance. I'd never performed anything before.
Wow.
Like I was
oh
not,
my God.
I'm not a singer. Can you tell that this voice doesn't translate to melodic singing? It's like, ugh. So I'm not a singer. I'm not like, I played piano for most of my life, but like even that was like more just like, I didn't do a lot of recitals. I didn't do theater. I didn't do like improv or anything in college. Like I truly, like the first time I got on stage with a microphone that was like a performance was doing this graduation class for this storytelling show.
How old were you?
26?
I think it was 20. I knew the answer. It was
You were like mouthing it to
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
Like, you know, I don't.
Yeah. Wow. That's so cool. But did you know you were funny since you were a kid?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, bitch. Mhm.
obviously.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
How?
and,
How?
I grew
Tell
up,
me about it.
I grew up in like a Jewish house. That's enough, right? No. But definitely like a long, real love in our family of like watching and consuming comedy. Like I knew, it's not like I didn't know comedy. I like knew like Mel Brooks, like those were some of the first movies that I saw that weren't cartoons. Like truly a huge fan. But there was one moment that I knew, I think that like my mom hates this story, but she hates so much of what I do. No, she loves the show I'm doing, but not everything about her. I had seen Wayne's World when I was, whenever it came out, 91 probably. I was in first grade. And I memorized it, not understanding probably 40% of the jokes. Just like, I just knew they were jokes though. And we were at the beach. We were ordering dinner and my mom was like, okay, well, what does everybody want to order? It was my mom and my cousin and his girlfriend at the time and one of their friends. They were all in their 20s. I'm like 10. And they were like, what do you want to order? And I was like, I'll have the cream of some young guy, which is, I did not know what that meant. I just knew it was funny. I knew.
Oh,
and my mom was like, it was so
God,
hard.
I'm dying. I'm dying.
My mom was like, it was so hard because like I couldn't laugh. I couldn't encourage you to ever say that again. And you definitely didn't understand what you were saying, but you did know it was funny. And like, she was like, we were all just like, no, not that.
I'm dying. Dude, I'm a new parent. I will not pass that test. I will laugh hysterically.
It's so funny.
That is so funny. A first grade girl quoting Wayne's World. That's wild. Oh, that's hilarious.
So I think like I was like even by that age, I was like, oh, there's something to being funny.
And you're a Jew. I know this. I'm like saying it as a question.
Like
but
we all know each other.
Yeah. And you grew up around not a lot of Jews.
Yeah, I went to a 2,000 person high school and there were like 4 Jews in my graduating class.
Yeah, I have similar stats.
And it's not fun.
Yeah, but you do kind of, or at least in my experience, Jews, I mean, in my high school, like the Jewish boys were like being funny as a way to up their masculinity currency. 'Cause
Yes.
they weren't like the Italian American boys or something.
Mine was all like golden retriever whites.
Nice.
Blondes.
Yep.
A lot of blondes.
So I wonder if that contributed to you knowing you were funny because you're already other in that.
Yeah,
respect.
I think it's like definitely becomes, I think that comedy for lots of people, whether they're Jewish or not, will allow it. But I think that a lot of people's comedy does come from some kind of othering and feeling like you have to compensate for something that you don't have that the rest of the group has by using humor. Right. Which I think I've definitely done at multiple points. But I also like...
I'm doing it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like, I think it's Seinfeld has said this where somebody was like, were you the funny one growing up? He's like, everybody was funny. And it's like, I believe that. Like, I have always had like the funniest group of friends. And it just kind of probably engendered a stronger sense of humor in me than people who aren't as funny.
Right, totally. So when you realize, like, I'm just doing stand-up, basically, what was your pivot from storytelling and a class context into going to open mics and being with mostly, storytelling is a softer, I think more diverse, but gender diverse space, whereas stand-up feels really hetero and male. So what was that pivot like?
Well, I took another class because
Love
didn't get that PhD. I really needed to academia my way into comedy. But I took just a stand-up class through the same. I did all those classes at the Pit.
Who was your teacher for stand-up?
It was Tom Shalhoub.
Gotcha.
Interesting.
Tom has pivoted into Fox News.
He has.
Woo-hoo.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was like I used to be at shows with him, and then I was like, what?
Now he's on Gutfeld every night.
Excuse me, on what?
Gutfeld?
No clue.
My years of working in like political late night comedy has broken my brain in a way that I know too much about what Fox is doing because like we had to know. It sucked.
It sucks. Yeah.
Like PTSD from that.
He was a nice guy.
He was a really nice guy.
So
Really
how was he as a stand-up teacher?
Excellent. And like I don't know if you can teach comedy. I don't like basic joke structure is like pretty teachable, but like it was more just to like force you like to get 5 minutes of thoughts together and to do like the show at the end of the class. And then like from there he was like, and now you have to go do this every night for the rest of your life. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. But then he was like, you just have to start going to open mics. And I think it made it easier for me to start going to open mics because I had 5 minutes of stuff that I had written that like it worked in the sense that I had been doing a comedy class and I did one show. Like, it's not like
it was a starting point.
But it was something because like, I mean, how do you show up for your first open mic? Like with every thought you've ever had, you get 3 minutes. Like,
and then you have that 5 minutes. You can add a joke in the beginning, a joke at the end.
Yeah, and then like start writing more stuff, and then start like figure and really like work through it. And I was just like, oh, okay. Like I'm glad that I had that going in because I think if I had just gone to an open mic without having taken that class and had some of those jokes together, like I just don't know what. I might have gotten like, I might have been like, I don't know if this is for me. Because open mics are like the most brutal thing that you could ever
they call
imagine.
your name and you're like, should I just skip it?
Yeah. It's like humiliating. Like it's
always at like 5 p.m.
Yeah, they're at 5 p.m. in a dark back room of a comedy club that no one goes to. And like, it's 19 men and you. And you're like, cool. And everybody's making a terrible joke about how they do or don't want to fuck you. And it's really devastating. And like, you have to really have some thick skin, like going into that. It's not it like, you know, I look back and it's like, yeah, I mean, it was amazing. And some of the most fun of my life was like learning how to do comedy and like growing up through the comedy scene. But boy, I look back and think of things that happened and I'm like, yeah. Like, and also, why isn't there HR in comedy?
Right. Oh my God. It's like Twitter now.
Yeah.
Just at that time too, like this is, I don't know, the Obama years. People were feeling loose and confident. Nuts. Absolutely wild. Ugh.
Yeah. Oh God, I know.
And also like
we're both like just triggered.
Yeah, and I'm like 35 now, and to think back to my 20s, I feel that vulnerability. I feel that literal physical agitation of youth.
Yes.
And bottling it in that room. It's just a nightmare. But also like the humiliation, as you say, that's such a funny, I mean, it's so funny, you know, like I'm going to my open mic and I'm going to go humiliate myself. It's but the kind of struggle that is so funny that it kind of makes sense. It tracks to why you have the mastery that you have now. Not just, I slogged through that, but to exist in that humiliation and then try and often fail. It's very funny.
Yeah, and there's also just a weird like kind of line to tread where like trying hard, I think in our culture in general, and I think especially for women, is not considered appealing. People don't like it when women try really hard, and they don't like it when women want things. And I think that like you have to like try hard, but also not make people feel like you're trying too hard because then they become threatened by you in this way. Like the ego politics of it all was another entire different kind of nightmare. Besides just physically being in a room with 19 men who all live together probably.
Okay, to that point of trying hard, I just want to like dig into that for a second.
Yeah.
So there is a trying hard that's transcendent of identity or body politics that is unattractive.
Yeah.
When you're like, all right, chill out, you know, when someone's trying too hard. When I'm trying too hard and I'm like, girl, please, you know, take a breath or whatever. But I guess there's a certain level of containing your trying to, I don't know, actually respecting the space and the stage and the opportunity, giving yourself to a point that's not, I guess, taking from others is when anyone is trying too hard. It's sort of like taking.
Yeah, I agree.
Just putting it out there. That we can try too hard too, I guess. But it's true. You're right that women are, it's considered unattractive.
Yeah.
And in stand-up also, it's supposed to be like, it's a particularly like effortless, I just came up with this or whatever.
As if I haven't been toiling away on this one sentence for 4 years.
Yep.
I'm like, oh, I just thought of that.
Yep.
But then when you do just think of it, it like, it somehow like makes the rest of it so much, like when you do just like come up with a tag on the fly and you're like, wow, cool, that came to me in a moment and it's perfect as is. And another sentence that's exactly the same has taken me 4 years to work on.
It's so
devastating.
Weird. It's weird though. It's like the layers of your subconscious clearing the way over time. You cannot rush that. My next question is, what's your writing process like? This is, you know, the Lucas brothers, the comedians and Academy Award nominees and writers and actors. They the other day called Alison, oh, she's a joke beast. And I was like, that's perfect. That's the name of your next album, Joke Beast.
Next. I haven't even recorded one.
Well, this will be the first one.
Seems like a lot of work.
This will be the first one. Oh God, a show about abortion will be the first one is what I mean. So your writing process, let's just talk about that for a minute. And specifically, you had a couple things that you came up with for the show recently that was just so interesting for me to hear your process.
Yeah, I mean, like for this show specifically, it started, I mean, like I didn't set out being like, I'm going to write a whole hour about my abortion experience. Like that was not a plan that I had when I started. I just wrote like, I was like, I wonder if I can write jokes about abortion that aren't going to feel like the jokes I hate about abortion, which are usually just told by men. I'm like, why are you weighing in? It's just not for you to talk about. Just listen. But I was like, how can I start? And so I kind of like built like 5 minutes and then it became 10 and then it became 15. And then I was like, well, if I have 15, I could do 60, which is just a psychotic approach to doing anything. I've done a quarter of the work. I guess I can finish this. But like, when it comes to writing a joke, like I still don't know how I do it. They're all different.
Well, what does it look like? You sitting at home, you on the couch,
I'm
you walk
home.
in?
Sometimes, yeah, I'm on my computer. I live in a 3-screen house. Screens are outnumbering people in my apartment 3-1. It's just me. Phone, laptop, television.
Yep.
They're all on at all times. I tend to like type mostly. I have very bad handwriting, but I have to then write it on a piece of paper before the show because that's the only way I can remember it. Nice. Handwriting is how I memorize things.
The whole thing?
I mean, not for this, but like for jokes, like for a 10-minute stand-up set, like I'll like write down a set list. So I'm like, yes, these words are now in my brain. I mostly just sit at home and kind of like start on something and like free write for a while and see like if I can find anything.
Like not as a joke, prose.
Like knowing that I'll get to the joke, but being like, what are all my thoughts on this thing?
Cool. Very cool.
I'm trying to think of like a topic that like specifically happened for with this show, but like, I think because this show has moments that are basically prose writing in it that are not just jokey joke stand-up stuff.
Right.
That required me to just like write everything you think about motherhood, which like, you know, could fill a book. Yeah, but then like some stuff comes like just like I'm walking and I think of something and I'm like, write it down, don't forget it. And you know, 50% of those are gone.
Yep.
And
I'm like, man, I had a great joke last night.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Too bad.
Yeah. Nobody'll know I'm a genius. Because I'll never hear that joke.
And like waking up in the middle of the night and like trying to write them down and being like.
On the phone or on paper?
Phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It scrambles your brain, right?
Yeah. It's just all broken.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. And then when it came to structuring this show, it was just like, I tried a couple like versions of like what needed to be included and like the story kind of like told it like one, it's a chronological story about an event that has a beginning and a middle and an end. So that's like not terribly hard to sort through, but it's like, how far back do you go? Like I started being like, how did we get here? How did I get to the point that I was having an abortion? What was why all of the things that led up to that made me feel the way I feel, made me think the way I think, like those are worth including, like sex ed, my relationship with my mother, the way that we talk about birth control, like all of those things are kind of like part of that narrative.
I see. That's so cool.
And then I just had some bits that I was like, well, I want to put this in the show and I'm going to figure out how.
Right. So I'm
going to shoehorn this joke in and people will be like, why is there 4 minutes about a plant store in the middle of this abortion show?
But it's so not shoehorned. I wanted to talk about this. Like the bits, like, you know, the material that I've seen you do for stand-up totally fit into the show. And I'm wondering if you, I don't know, like for one thing, I want to talk about the pivot from stand-up into housing it in an hour and what makes it theater, what makes it feel like theater. But I think we'll get to that. First, I want to talk about like, you know, honing in on a voice. I mean, like it's not shoehorned, but I hear what you mean. It's not shoehorned, but it's like it fits in, and I think it speaks to like what I was initially so taken with of you. I don't know grammar anymore. Why I was so taken with you. Took is how just female and woman-centric your perspective is, and it's unapologetic, you know. So a plant store, I mean, it just fit into this show seamlessly, and you know, bits on jeans. I mean, it's so.
I could do an hour on jeans.
I mean, you really.
I would love to.
You have at least 15 in the show. I mean,
Easy.
and it's enjoyable. You know what I mean? It makes. It's not even like, oh, it lightens up the heavy parts about abortion. It's like there are mundane, funny things that happen on the way to your abortion, and both are equally comedy for you in your experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like also early on, like I'm a woman. I wrote about the things that happen to me and that I think about. And a lot of those are about being a woman and the things that I encounter. And it's like, I read women's magazines, I watch reality TV, like I do the things that are like quote unquote female in our culture. And that's what I think about. And so I wanted to write about it. And I remember writing, I think it's a part of the joke is in the show now, but like it's a very old joke about women's magazines. And I remember after a show, this guy who was an open micer that I knew, he was like, wow, I really didn't think I would like a joke about women's magazines, and that joke is really good. And I was like, well, as long as Brett likes it, like, then great. So, but like, just like, I just remember being like, on one hand, like being like, okay, this is working. Like, if a guy, like, he's exactly what you think he is.
Yep. If Brett, the guy you think exactly is who he is.
Right. If he is looking at that joke and saying like, that's funny, and it's outside of his personal experiences and his like narrative, then like, okay, this is, it made me like feel good in some ways. And then I was like, who are you to tell me that?
But you know what it is though, Alison, is like what is so radically female about your material is that it's not fitting into the scripted, you know, from a guy's point of view, and I'm a woman in his world. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And it's like, Brett, you've never seen the cover of a woman's magazine?
Right.
Like, we all exist in the world.
Yes.
But
right.
I guess it's just, the jokes are just so funny and well written, and you're so funny that even Brett gets it.
Even Brett gets it. That's the name of the next album. Even Brett gets it.
That is so funny. So let's talk about your abortion.
All right.
Because it really relates to our friendship.
It does.
It's wild.
Like, very importantly.
So we were together when it happened on tour.
Yeah.
On the road, doing comedy.
Yeah. We were doing a tour. It was you and me and Petey and like all of like our whole little fun crew. And like 2 days in, I was like, I found out I was pregnant, but I didn't tell anybody because I was like, this isn't about me. I'm not trying to like make everybody deal with this. Like, I also like didn't have a whole lot of complex emotions about it. I was like, all right, I have like 9 days and then I'll be in New York. I can just do it then and it'll be fine. So I also didn't want people to be like, are you okay? Not that anybody would necessarily do that in our group, but you never know.
I think we would have been like, are you okay?
Yeah, right.
But
I mean, yes.
we're like, what are you feeling? I don't know. Yeah.
And so many people that I had like just met, and I was like, I don't know if they need to know what's going on with me. But it was a wild experience to be like going through all of these red states. We were doing basically a tour of blue dots and red states.
Yep.
And like to be in Missouri and Texas and Tennessee. I don't know. They're all terrible.
For abortion rights.
Legislatively. They're all terrible legislatively. It felt crazy to be like, at each stop, I was like, wow, I wonder if this is something that I could have done here or not.
Right.
Like, it feels very, like, it felt very strange, like to be like driving through Kentucky. Like, I'm sure we saw like conservative billboards and signs. And I feel like we've definitely, we pointed them out or saw them or whatever. And it's like it was the first time I felt real like I'm a straight cis white woman of incredible privilege. Like, I have not felt like, aside from the woman part of it, like I have never felt in danger or or other, like, yeah, growing up Jewish with a bunch of Christians, like, yes, but like not, this was the first time I was like, oh, like the fear that people of color and trans and non-binary people, gay people, like all of these people who are marginalized intentionally in this country feel fear all the time this was the first time I really felt that.
Right.
And it's still different because like if I was anybody else and in this experience, it would be even worse.
Right.
But it was crazy to be going through those states at that time.
Like the potential.
And with the secret.
Right. The potential of physical danger, you know, to not be able to have an abortion is forced labor is
Yes.
physical, it's torture. And it's so wild to be like, well, I'm going back to New York. Like,
right.
But imagine if that weren't
right.
your life. It's terror. It is terrorizing and terror.
Right. All of the new laws that Texas, Oklahoma, Tennessee have passed, I could not have had the abortion I had in those states. I didn't even know I was pregnant and early enough. Mm-hmm. Like, and that's just crazy.
It's psychotic.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this.
Yeah.
So what's remarkable about your show is how, is how funny it is, but and how just densely brilliant the writing is and your performance. But the way that you speak about abortion, it's, it is a big deal. There's something also mundane about it. When you walk us through the the process of it, and it's a medical procedure, I guess what it is sitting and being a part of this show and watching it, and it also has this inviting nature where it feels like you're so conversational because that is like what your comedy brings. I guess what makes it a big deal is only the stigma.
Yeah. It's it's both, it's annoying to me that like doing this show outside of our current political climate, like would even be the kind of thing where it's like, whoa, a show about that? Like it shouldn't even be like, I could do a show about my root canals and
right.
Those were much more devastating than my abortion.
Yeah.
Physically, emotionally, financially. I mean, in every way they could be. But nobody would care. And nobody would have to think about it. And I understand that what abortion is different from a root canal, but at the same time, it's also not.
Yeah.
And it's just, we police women's bodies so intensely that like anything we do when we talk about things that are bodily to us and related to our physicality is inherently this political thing where like it wouldn't be true. Like if a man was doing a show about jerking off,
He's fucking colonoscopy,
like whatever that like even if it was like more sexual than medical, like it would still not register in the way that this I think does for people as being like a thing.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be a thing.
And it's so strange, the timing of how this is coming together. You were supposed to do this show a long time ago and COVID pushed it back and all this legislation has been looming and is now coming down. It's eerie how timely it is, but also it's devastating how timeless it is.
Right. That like, I remember writing it and it takes place in 2019 and I was writing it shortly after and I was like, wow, this is the worst. Like these laws that these other states, that Missouri and other states were trying to pass then, their 6-week bans, which none of them succeeded. Like to me, I was like, it's never going to be worse than this.
Yep.
And now I'm like, well, it's never going to be worse than it feels like it continually somehow
and we have in 2019, Trump was the president. Biden's president now.
Right.
And we have the, supposedly blue Senate and Congress. It's so, I guess there's, sort of like in your life, whatever your identity politics are, the microaggressions that come at you, the volume depending on whatever, your spectrum, where you lie on the spectrum of marginalization, but it's like about a sorting out and a parsing out and a making sense of things. And your show helps make sense of destigmatizing it, for sure, where it's like, it makes it even more, I want to say psychotic, but it's not that. It makes it more absurd. It's almost, it becomes an absurdist thing where just the mundaneness, how you were looking at jeans beforehand, you just went home after choosing your outfit. I don't know. Did it feel, how does the level of funniness feel over time since you started it, now that we're in it?
There's lines that I've dropped because I'm like, this line just feels different knowing that Roe v. Wade is going away and that more and more incredibly horrific bans are coming through in different states. That like there are like little jokes where I'm like, you know what? I could lose that and like it's fine to me. It does feel like I think that there are moments of the show that hit people a little bit harder now than it did before the Monday that the leak came out. But it kind of, every audience is, because it's such a personal topic, every audience is already very different. And different people like really connect to the different parts of the show. And I think like one of the things that isn't in it now and is something that I want to try, and it's like, not only do I think that we need to destigmatize like abortion, but we also need to like, when we talk about it as something that we want to be safe, legal, and rare, and that abortion is this like kind of necessary evil that like you're lucky to get the access to, that also kind of hurts because it makes you feel bad for not feeling bad. Like we still kind of, even when we talk about it, we still talk about it as this thing that we don't encourage people to feel ashamed of, but it is kind of this thing where it's like, I had to have one. There's something about that. And like, because I felt very little emotional connection to that experience and had no real questions about what to do in that moment, it then made, like, I felt bad about not feeling worse.
Yeah. It's almost like, the fetus is still considered a baby. That's a miracle in this context.
Yeah. And it's just, I think that like the step one is just normalization of abortion and encouraging people just to be open about it if they want to be and not feel shame and stigmatization and othered by people for having one. But beyond that, it's also the way we talk about it needs to change too. And it needs to allow space for people to have or not have feelings about it, because I don't want to like, I think people like I think that people who are like incredibly pro-choice and or claim to be will sometimes like react and be like to me not really feeling much about it, a little bit like I'm a monster. Like, oh, you didn't feel anything? Like, it's good that you got it, but like, you didn't feel anything? And it's like, no, was I supposed to? I understand why people do. They absolutely should. If you have
that's what comes up for them.
Happens to you. Right. But like, I think this assumption that it is this big thing for everybody and that everybody needs to feel the same way, and we police how women feel about these experiences, is another element of like the destigmatization that needs to happen for abortion.
That's right.
Oh.
That was just coming up for me. First, we're policing women's bodies, then we're policing their emotions.
Yeah.
Isn't what comes up for each person who has an abortion valid?
Yeah. And I think like, I dig into this in the show a little bit, but I think like our feelings on abortion are tied to the fact that we live in like an incredibly natalist, obsessive culture with parenthood and having children and the nuclear family.
Yep.
And if we were just more accepting of people wanting and not wanting different versions of what family can be, and not all of those are going to be having biological children, then like our relationship to abortion can be a little bit more normal. It's like there's still this expectation of like, well, you're a woman and you can, so you should.
Right.
And
or you should want to.
You should
have feelings around it.
And that so many people, I think, want it and can't, then complicates it further. And like everybody has different feelings, and like motherhood and fertility and parenthood in general is so wrought with emotion for so many people that we also need to make space for the people who don't want that.
Yeah, you said this at dinner the other night about this country hates community because
and this country hates community.
We were sorting it out like, because I feel like because the nuclear family, they want people isolated so that they need to buy more shit instead of just asking your community, hey, you got whatever it is, I'll order it on Amazon or whatever. And we were talking about like kids need more non-parent adults in their lives who aren't creepy or what I'm thinking of, like the creepy ones I know.
Not just like park guys.
Exactly.
Agreed.
Exactly, or Psycho Mike from my town. Yikes. Who really just had addiction issues, and that was the suburban narrative that Psycho Mike fit into. But that's right about this is kind of about community. That it's just a good point. And the thing about your show is that it becomes this space. It's a community space to talk about abortion, and Cherry Lane is has just such a good energy about it. And I wanted to talk about the pivot from stand-up into theater. This is an off-Broadway theater production now, and I wonder if that connects for you the way it is for me right now. Community, and just that context. Yeah,
I mean, I do think that there is just getting up and doing the show every night to an audience full of people. It does just feel. One, in this political climate, it feels nice to be together with people talking about this, even though I'm the one doing the talking, which is how I prefer it at all times. There is something nice, in especially in the days following the leak. Everybody was like, "How are you feeling?" as the person performing the show, and also someone who's had an abortion. And I'm like, it's really nice to get to spend an hour every night with a room full of people sharing this thing and listening to me talk about this in a way that I think is earnest and heartfelt. And it's a lot better than just doom scrolling on my phone through Twitter until I fall asleep every night, which is what I do after the show. But it does feel there is a real warm community feel to the show. And I think part of that is absolutely Cherry Lane, and it's just history and that room and the people who work there and are producing the show. And there's just a real sense of community to that. What was the other part of that question? Well, that's it, kind of. And it's interesting. It's what are you doing? How do you feel? And you're I actually feel productive. You're gathering people. You're leading them through a consciousness that's both truthful, celebratory, normal, mundane. Yeah. It's so healthy for you that you have that space, but also for us that we get to be in your mind during this time. As I am finding such a gift. That would have been a nice note, a sweet note to end on. But we have a few more minutes, and I really wanted to talk about rage. Oh, yeah. Rage. So we'll end on a kapow before we turn to your guys' Q&As. So you do this amazing, you have this amazing performance device that our community and generation of comedians love, which is pulling the mic away and screaming. That feels good. I really have always wanted to do it. I don't know. I mean, it's I don't even know. I just want to bring it up and talk about it. It's first of all the container for female rage that we all appreciate, for human rage that we all. I know Brett loves the screams. Brett loves the scream. Even if I don't know if he's giving you credit for it, but what does that? I mean, okay, abortion, normalize it. We're all on the same page there. But the rage right now feels fucking good to watch you scream on stage. How does it feel for you? I love screaming. It's my favorite thing to do. If there's one thing you love more than talking, it's screaming. Yes. Oh, thank you. It's very true. I love it as a comedy device. I also have a pretty good screaming voice. It's not a singing voice, but it is a screaming voice. Oh, it's good. And there is something screaming is kind of it's like crying or orgasming or what, it's tension release. And I think that it does that as a device in comedy, but it also for me lets me take a big breath afterwards and move into the next thing. And my favorite screaming moment that I have is in the show, I imagine what an honest birth control commercial might look like. And it leads to kind of this woman and her shitbag husband in the kitchen, and he's like, come on, I want to go to my fantasy league. This is the one thing I do for me. And she's like, it's all for you. And and it just it's a joke, and it's a fun moment, and of course it's kind of also a tone shift for what comes next and everything like that. But it also is it's not just some dumb bazinga. It's a real, not to shade the richest people in Hollywood. Love them, bazinga all the way, but I think that there's something to screaming that moment, that phrase, that is how I feel. I do feel like men get to do everything that they want to do, and women are left picking up the pieces, not even in relationships or parental situations, but just culturally. That is something that we have to do. We take on so much, and like they do get to just kind of live their lives. And there's a lot in the show about the way that women have to live versus the way that men get to live. And that moment is such, like, for me, an enjoyable moment in the show, because it's funny, and also I get to scream super loud at a man who doesn't exist.
It's so funny, and also the tones of your scream. You really do have a great. It's all for you. There's music to it.
Should we you can harmonize the next time?
We got to remix that scream. It's great. I love it. That's one of my favorite devices of yours. Okay, so we have some questions. We'll try to get to all of them. Comedy comes from a feeling of other, such a beautiful sentiment. I recently had an abortion. I am very confident and comfortable with my decision, but I'm still wary of others knowing. How did you get comfortable sharing? Thank you for sharing your story.
Oh, I love that. And thank you for sharing. Whoever out there, more people have told me about their abortions in the last couple of years since every time I do the show, than collectively in my entire life and probably in most people's lives. And I love it so much. And somebody asked me if it gets exhausting or hard. And I'm like, no, I want to be the container for other people to feel like they can, even if I'm the only person anyone tells. It's just, to me, I love it so much. I'm like tearing up thinking about it. I love it so much. I've cried in front of you so many times. That's friendship. I think for me, I did it kind of slowly. It was not just like I didn't announce on Instagram that I had an abortion, and I guess now I have. Now I do every single day. Every single day is me shouting about my abortion.
And twice on Saturdays, actually.
Yeah, twice on Saturdays. Today would be off, but here I am doing it again. But I think like it was definitely something that felt, even though like I'm someone who feels very confident also in my decision and proud and lucky that I got access to it, I still felt like in telling people like there's that moment. They're like, what is this person? Even when I know the person sitting across from me is not going to judge me, there's still, and I think that that's something that unfortunately, like, no matter what, like that starts at our culture and not at interpersonal things. And I think that because the stigma and because of how you're supposed to feel and how you're supposed to, everybody expects, like, there's a script for how you should be after you have your abortion. You're supposed to be relieved but devastated, and you're supposed to be questioning everything. You know, I think that that's what we expect, like, in the way that there's a script for victimhood usually. Not that having an abortion does not make you a victim at all in any way, but I think what makes it very hard, especially like when you're someone who is confident and knows that you made the right choice, like that it is this thing where you're like, people are expecting a specific way for me to act and talk and feel about this. And if I don't, then like that's what they're going to judge. And I think just knowing that the people you share it with should be the only people you want to. Like, just because we're in this moment where we should normalize and destigmatize abortion does not mean that everybody should feel forced to share their experience with others.
That's right.
So it's all personal choice.
That's right. How important is the audience reactions to you in your show, and does it change your energy?
I mean, I get mad at them sometimes when they don't laugh enough, and then sometimes I scold them because I'm like, that's a good joke and you should have laughed at that. And then that gets a laugh, and it's definitely another device. I mean, I will say that doing this show in a COVID era is pretty devastating because I can't see people. It is a masked theater, which I am so grateful for, but I can't see people's faces. And the one thing that I really wish I could do sometimes, especially as we come to like the closing of the show, like the end of the hour, not the closing of the show from the theater, is I wish that I could, connect more with people, because I do feel it, but I don't get to see it. but over like I have had nothing but wonderful audiences. The worst audiences have just been people that like audiences that are a little quieter, and I wish they were laughing a little harder. But other than that, like it's been so positive and so well received, and adjusting to like going from stand up to this show where there's these moments where I'm talking for a while and it's not a joke. I'm used to like every 12 seconds there needs to be a laugh. Otherwise, what are you doing on stage? And that's not what this is. And
Right.
I think it took me a little while, but I'm like really comfortable in those moments now that I can feel from the audience that like you can feel when someone's listening, and I feel like they're listening, and that's what I'm asking them to do. So it's been good.
Yeah, that engagement of listening rather than laughing. That's so interesting.
It took a minute to like understand what it was, because I was like, am I bombing? And I'm like, well, these aren't jokes, so I don't know. How do I feel about this?
Very interesting. How do you deal with criticism, especially right now?
I have to say, I haven't really gotten any, because it's perfect. No. Because what could they criticize? There's no flaws. No, I've been like I'm a woman who does stand up, who's been on the internet for as long as it's been around. I have been heavily criticized, treated terribly, insulted, threatened. Nothing around this show has been like that. I haven't been getting like DM requests from strangers being like, you're a baby killer. Like that's what I was prepared for, and I was like and ready for. But if anything, I just get messages from people that are like, thank you for reflecting an experience that I feel like I never, like my experience. I've never seen that. Thank you. Like it's been very, nothing but like positive responses. And, you know, I think in the comments of articles about it, sometimes people start arguing, but they're usually just arguing about like when life begins. And I'm like, this isn't about me. This is bigger than me.
That's interesting. Maybe it's so true and personal that it's like you can't really criticize it unless you see it. And like the people who are seeing it like are happen to be pro-choice.
Yeah.
Not really.
Right. And again, it's titled specifically to make sure that no one gets tricked into seeing the abortion show, because I don't want them there either if they don't want to be there.
Right.
So.
Right. What advice would you give to those dealing with writer's block and taking the step to start writing?
Oof. Do something else. Like not like professionally or like go to medical school. But like don't, I've never been somebody like, unless you're like on a deadline and you have to send in a certain number of words to someone else at a certain point. But if you're just trying to get out of your own way, like physically get out of your own way, like go outside, go for a walk. I am not somebody who can like chain myself to a computer and be like, write jokes now. Like if it's not happening, it's not happening. Like let it, like listen to your brain and let it kind of tell you when it's ready to do the work. Cause like also consume other art, like read, or watch TV. I think TV is art.
Me too.
I know. It's like we kind of banked on it being art for our careers. Or movies, or go to a museum. Like go do something that'll like make you think about anything else, because usually thinking about something else will like get you into more of a writing space than like your brain being like write. Like it won't.
And
or at
also
least mine won't.
and taking the step to start writing. Okay, so if you wrote this, you're here in this room in New York. I think just taking a walk and talking to a stranger, I mean, that is just the richness of New York. You can get into a whole damn thing and hear someone's entire life. Boy, are they happy to tell you.
Yeah.
Because healthcare is not accessible and people need therapy. Yeah. Get out and just talk to a stranger. But to Alison's point, just don't even sit and try. And also, and taking the step to start writing, I think that, and this is kind of like how you helped me get back into stand-up after a hiatus, like, you know, and also you may not have access to a brilliant comedian to do this, but to make like a date with a friend to talk to them for an hour about your writing and what you want to talk about, just getting it out. And, you know, you just said like when you have a deadline and you're like, oh, fuck, I got to do this. And then your brain does like spark into action. But if you don't have a deadline to self-impose one, to make that structure. And I think being like, I'm only going to take up an hour of your time talking to my, you know, and talking about my stuff or whatever. But yeah.
When my director Lila joined the show, she had read the script and I was like, the part that's the hardest for me is this middle chunky thing about like motherhood and women and all. How do you distill an entire concept into like 10 minutes? And so I had versions of it, and they were all very different, and they were all kind of like muddy and not quite great. And like she and I, when we first met, had such a lovely conversation just about like where we are personally with the material in terms of like how we connect to it. I mean, obviously I wrote it. It's my life and my thoughts. But the first time we got together, which ended up being over Zoom, I was like, I would love if we could just talk about these ideas, not in the context of the show, and just have this kind of discussion of how we both feel as women over 35, not mothers. What does it feel like to not be a mother? What are like her thoughts on wanting to be one, possibly, like all of these things. Like, and we just kind of like talked. And then I went and wrote like a couple days later, and those things were like, I let them marinate for a bit. So talking.
And what you're bringing up for me is like trusting the process. I'm 35. I've been doing comedy for 16 years. And at least the first half being like, is this it? How do other people do it? What's it like? Am I doing it right? And it's like actually living your life, talking with friends or whatever the fuck. You have no friends and you're like, I'm antisocial. Whatever your, whatever your
life
thing is the process. And, if you are an artist, I mean, everyone has creativity and the capacity to create. And it's like, it's all part of it, the work and the rest and the creating, and the work and the rest and the creating.
Yeah. You have to live a life worth writing about.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean like it has to have a certain value, but like you have to do stuff.
You have to live.
Yeah.
And like your living is part of the process, and not even saying like, just to sort of honor yourself as being the vessel for your creativity.
Yeah.
How often in this show do you go off script?
Oh, like almost never. It is too much to memorize to start playing around too much. I do like now, like the first it's 70 minutes of words. It's 25 pages of script to memorize.
Woo!
It's so much.
You
would think
I'm talking single space. We're talking prose. This is not
just
choreographed.
Like, it's a 25-page Google Doc. That's what it is. It took so much for me to memorize it and to have it like not just memorize it so I could like regurgitate it, but like really have it in me and know it. I'm just now getting to the point where I can start making changes and like stepping out of it for a second to like address like I'm a stand-up. Like I want to address what happens in the room. If somebody like has a weird reaction to something, like I want to call it out, not to make fun of them, but to be like, oh, we're all here together. This isn't a television show. Like we're in a room. And I feel like I can do that. But for the most part, it's the same every night.
Yeah. That
every single night.
Now you have like a couple new tags. You must be so excited.
And they get the biggest the new I have like one or two new lines that I've written in the last couple of days that like get the biggest laugh. And like I don't think it's because they're the funniest. I think it's because I'm delivering them with like actual excitement in a way that like the rest of the show.
They got sauce.
Yeah.
All
yeah.
Right.
Oh.
And I mean they're really funny, but also you must be bringing the sauce. Okay, just a few more here. So first, would like to share that you both have inspired me to become a Jewish woman comedian and to take up that space.
I love it.
Pleased to serve in this way. Second, how did you get from open mics to getting into shows and becoming more confident in putting yourself out there in this male-dominated scene? From Robin Weiss. Thank you, Robin.
Robin, I mean, first of all, congrats.
Congratulations.
You have a whole fun life ahead of you. It happens very organically. Like you go grind through open mics, every single night of the week from 5 p.m. to 1 a.m., which is how I did it, which I wouldn't recommend. I think you can do less. But you start to get to know people, and usually it's like if there's one other woman in the room, you become friends with her. And that's certainly how I made some friends, was just like, oh, an ally. We're in this together. But you start to meet people, and then they're like, it is an industry and a specifically a corner of the industry that like really operates on friendship. And like, and networking. But like, it is just like meeting people who are all doing this. And then they're like, we started up a show, want to come do it? And you kind of slowly move through it. I do think that it took longer to get to doing certain things as a woman because early on, like in that at different points in the industry, that affects you in different terrible ways. But early on, because it's so friend based at the open mic to like first rounds of shows levels, those guys are helping each other and they are mostly, and I don't even think it's intentional. I'm not trying to say that like every man who does comedy is a misogynist, but their first thought is, I'm going to ask my best buddy, Dave, to do the show, not Alison, the woman who I see sometimes. And I think that really hurts. There are more women doing it now. And as I was like coming up, I remember just seeing more and more women starting. And I think like find those and like befriend the women. Like they're definitely also feeling alone. So.
Yep. Yeah. And it happens incrementally. It's just the one thing I wanted to put on. And it's not like, it's just like you grind and then you have a show that like really hits and you're like, oh, that was so good. And those become more common, common occurrences for you.
Yeah.
Okay. What has been your favorite comedy experience?
Meeting you. Truly a highlight.
I mean, absolutely. A golden trophy of my whole career.
Favorite comedy experience.
Oh my gosh.
I don't even know how to begin.
Is this it? I mean, is this show?
I think right now.
This moment.
Is
this show like your favorite? Is it? It's kind of hard to.
It's so hard because there's so many like different ways to value the things that have happened to me in my career. Like this show, I think, is definitely my favorite thing that I've made. I think it's also like the most high profile thing that I've made. It's the longest thing that I've made. But it is like a container for so much of me that I really do love doing it because I think you can walk out of the show and you really do know who I am. And I can't say that for every 10 or 15 minute set that I've done at a club or on the road or whatever.
Right.
I really loved hosting weekly shows though. I miss
with Robert.
With Robert Dean.
Yeah.
We used to host a Sunday. A man.
Just pointing it out.
Well, somebody had to legitimize the show. But the two of us ran a Sunday night show for many, many years that we took over from another woman and man who were running it. And it was just, you just got to see everybody every week. And every comic that was coming through town would come do it. And the crowds were great. And like Sunday night, like you guys get it, Sunday nights in New York are kind of the most fun. And it was just like, I don't know. I like hosting. It's like looser. Now I'm so like kind of like contained in this show. But that's like, to me, it's like those moments, like the funnest show I've ever done. It's probably some 10-minute spot that I did in Bushwick with a bunch of my friends. Yeah. And we ended up just like smoking weed all night and hanging out and having a really good time and making fun of the crowd. Like those are the really fun things that you like remember. But in terms of enjoyment from what I'm doing, this hour is by far like the most it's everything.
Yeah. Final one. I gotta like answer this one. What's the best way to explain the importance of women's health care to a Republican? I honestly think don't.
Yeah.
I think just find people who don't vote and Democrats who are moderate who need to be pulled left and talk to those people.
Yeah.
Republicans are a troll version of the coded version they used to be, but now it's psycho and it's too binary and it's insane. And I wouldn't waste your beautiful energy, whoever wrote this, on trying to explain it to someone who doesn't even care because they know what it is anyway.
Yeah.
Whew. Oh, I'm getting angry. I'm enraged. I'm so angry. Oh, I did an Alison. So that is it. Thank you all so much for hanging out with us.
Thank you.
Give it up for Alison Leiby.
And for Ilana Glazer.
Oh God, a show about abortion was extended to June 30th. That's merely the first extension. And come see us and come hang out.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Have a good night.